Thief the Dark Project is a 1998 first-person stealth immersive sim developed by Looking Glass Studios. What can I say about Thief that hasn't been said already? It's a damn classic. Thief literally pioneered a whole genre, only for Looking Glass Studios to close its doors mere months after releasing its equally excellent 2000 sequel, Thief 2: The Metal Age. Thief left such a strong legacy and was so ahead of its time that long after its release, game developers were still using it as reference when making their own stealth games. Like, it's safe to say that Thief is directly responsible for Dishonored's existence, or that Splinter Cell's stealth mechanics have some Thief DNA in them. Hell, there's even a recent game that barely anyone played called Filcher that captures Thief's essence and spirit so accurately that it made me long for a hypothetical subgenre of games that never even existed in the first place, if that makes any sense. Playing Filcher felt like being sent to a parallel universe where Thief spawned a whole niche of stealth games that use directional audio and different surface types as core gameplay mechanics. By the way, I made a video about Filcher. You should watch it. Or not. I'm not the boss of you. Anyways, what I'm saying is that as influential as Thief ended up being, nobody truly picked up the mantle and took Thief's gameplay innovations to the next level. So before we start, we need to talk fixes. The version you'll most likely play is Thief Gold. This was an expanded edition released by Looking Glass Studios a full year after the original, which included a bunch of tweaks to existing levels and added 3 brand new missions. It also eliminated some, let's say, creative exploits from the base game. For example, in Return to the Cathedral, there were a bunch of ways to skip Brother Murus' questline, which made up the bulk of the mission. That's not possible in Gold. Good luck shitting your pants, bucko. Now, since the GOG version supports widescreen resolution, all you need to do is grab tfix, tick a few boxes, and install it in the game directory. I also installed a custom keybind mod which modernizes the controls. By the way, I've tested this mod on Thief 2 and it seems to be working just fine. If you're a new player and you're struggling with the default controls, just grab this fix. It's a simple copy and paste to the saves folder. And of course, all these fixes will be linked in the description. Also, special thanks to Lapin for allowing me to use songs from his album Thief City in this video. Go check it out on his Bandcamp and, maybe consider buying it if you dig it. More about this album and a couple more Thief fan projects later in the video. Also, I have a Blue Sky and a Patreon where you can support the channel with real life money. Let's get to some thieving. Thief the Dark Project centers on an import/export specialist called Garrett. Garrett started life as a street urchin. No family, no home. Picking pockets, stealing, running messages, doing pretty much any odd job under the sun to, as he poetically put it, stop his ribs from meeting his spine. One night, while prowling the streets for his next mark, an elusive, robed figure caught his attention. The man carried himself in a way that Garrett had never seen before. More presence than man, firmly attached to a space between perceptible and perceivable. To Garrett's surprise, the usually curious denizens of the city's poor district just seemed to ignore him. Must be another wealthy asshole acting like he owns the place, he figured. So, sensing an opportunity to relieve yet another rich sucker from his fat purse, Garrett snuck up on him and made the grab. And then...
That's not for you.
Please, sir, I'm hungry. Don't tell the Hammers, I promise.
What is your name, boy?
Garrett.
You have talent, lad.
Let go of me, old man!
To see a keeper is not an easy thing. Especially one who does not wish to be seen.
Garrett's mark was no mere man, but a high-ranking member of a secret organization called the Keepers. The man's name is Artemis. For now, all you need to know is that he'll play a larger role in Thief 2 and Deadly Shadows. Anyways, Artemis, impressed by the young man's talents, offers Garrett the chance to join the secret order. Garrett, ever the pragmatist, accepts the man's offer. And so began Garrett's education. The Keepers helped Garrett hone his innate stealth and subterfuge skills, while also teaching him how to spar, shoot bows, and the importance of a balanced diet. Garrett eventually left the Keepers to become a freelance security consultant for the city's burgeoning property reallocation industry. Things went relatively well until... Yeah, let's take a step back and talk about a setting. In my 25 or so odd years of playing video games, I went through hundreds, if not thousands of titles. Some games I remember fondly, to the point that I can probably do a verbal mission-by-mission reenactment of my latest playthrough. Others are no more than distant, hazy memories. I can sort of recall vaguely the shape of my experience and maybe some highlights, but nothing more than that. But what has always stuck with me, even more than the games themselves, are the conversations I've had about them with friends and random strangers. Those lively conversations fueled by just the right amount of booze that only a great piece of art, in our case video games, can produce. For all the years I've had late night bar back and forths about hundreds of games with just as many people. And I'm not shitting you when I say that out of all those games, none have spawned more excited discussions than Thief. There's just something about this game that makes a dude suddenly break out in frenzied raves, like the world's shittiest sleeper agent. But why though? Could it be the fact that Thief virtually pioneered the first-person stealth genre, its brooding, oppressive atmosphere, Thief's eclectic soundtrack which fuses ambient with industrial and instrumental hip-hop, the excitement of sneaking through heavily guarded compounds, always outgunned and outnumbered? Or maybe people just find Thief's suave, cynical, film noir-coded anti-hero protagonist who's eternally behind with his rent despite being a master thief relatable? I think it's a little bit of everything, and a third, or whatever, I lost count, special spice. Namely, the way all those elements coalesce into a cohesive, highly immersive whole. See, gameplay is not the only place where Thief innovated. It's just that Thief did so many things right from the get-go that you don't even realize it was the first one to attempt them. Take Garrett. While Garrett is far from being the first video game anti-hero protagonist, I'd argue he was really the first one to display the sort of psychological nuance and complexity that made early 2000s golden age era prestige TV protagonists so attractive. Look, I'm not saying he's on the level of a, say, Tony Soprano or Don Draper or whatever, but you have to keep in mind that Garrett is of a time when games were, with a few notable exceptions, focused on gameplay. Since I could never do Garrett's character justice, I recommend reading this very intriguing deep dive into Garrett's psychology. Still, it wouldn't be me if I didn't talk about things I have no business talking about, so let's give it a try anyway. By far, my favorite topic of discussion is why Garrett left the Keepers, mainly because when you really take a moment and think about it, it says so much about Garrett as a person. While the story never fully explains Garrett's sudden professional reconversion, I think it's safe to say it's a combination between Garrett feeling like he doesn't belong and the Keepers being a bunch of fucking squares that cramped his style. For one, the game hints, and later in the trilogy outright confirms, that Garrett is special. He is not only in a league of his own as a thief, but also amongst the highly secretive Keepers. A once in a few generations type of talent whom the Keepers had great plans for. But here's the thing, Garrett, beyond his sarcastic and sardonic exterior, is a deeply traumatized man who, even as a child, had to fend for himself, and also build walls on walls of cool detachedness to survive on the streets. He was always an outsider and a loner, because trusting the wrong people could mean certain death. However, even though I said Garrett accepted Artemis's offer out of pragmatism, I think his motives were not entirely self-serving. Sure, joining the Keepers meant food, protection, and a warm bed, but you know, two things can be true at the same time. Ironically, the fact that he was the most talented prospect the Keepers had recruited in a generation made him feel like an outsider. And since he was neither intellectually driven nor politically savvy enough to sort of carve his own place in the organization, Garrett decided to take his talents elsewhere. Now, I may be overanalyzing a story beat that might not amount to more than Garrett left the Keepers because they are cringe, but I think that's the game's intent. See, Thief doesn't overwhelm you with lore and exposition. It explains just enough to pique your curiosity, and then it leaves it to you to fill in the blanks. Like, Garrett is such a fun character because he doesn't say much. He knows these streets like the back of his hand, he's a master of his craft, so he doesn't need to explain himself. You are the one trying to catch up with him. You are the one scrambling to discern meaning from his offhand remarks. Similarly, the game shows remarkable restraint in explaining even the three main factions that Garrett deals with throughout the story, and also the nature of the metropolis, known literally as the city. Briefly, the three factions are the Keepers, which we've already sort of talked about, the Hammerites and the Pagans. The Hammerites are a technocratic religious order that worship a deity called the Builder. They believe in progress and the development of civilization through technology. And before you say anything, no, they're not Thief's equivalent to Tech Bros. That distinction goes to the Mechanists, but more on them when we get to Thief 2 The Metal Age 2000. The Pagans are the polar opposite of the Hammerites. They value the natural world and worship a deity called the Trickster God. The only thing you need to know here is that the Hammers and the Pagans are in constant conflict, and the Keepers serve as a sort of balancing force. As for the city, it's a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma. Not much is known about its history apart from the fact that it's built on top of several successive cities ruled by mysterious civilizations that have long since vanished. Despite chainmail-clad guards and heavily armored religious zealots speaking in King James Bible English, the city is not your typical medieval setting. It's a late medieval world with a dash of technology and some early industrial revolution aesthetics. Some have described it as steampunk, and I think it's a pretty accurate label. There's some electricity and some heavy 19th century-like machinery, but it's all very rudimentary and unreliable, as if they're the first prototypes a handful of startups rushed to market to preemptively kill any potential competition. Because this technology is so primitive and presumably accessible only to the elite, it makes sense that torches are still used to light some interiors. And beyond the steam engines and street lamps, there's the horrors beyond human comprehension. What makes Thief's setting so cool is not necessarily its mix of medieval and industrial revolution elements, but how they're integrated in the story. For example, the Hammerites are basically construction contractors. Their factories produce doorknobs, light switches, security cameras, alarm systems, and all sorts of essential technology. Now, their industriousness has objectively improved living standards in the city. See the fully functioning sewage system. But there's a more sinister side to this. You might have noticed a theme in the technology they produce. Doorknobs, security cameras, light switches. It's as if the Hammerites are going out of their way to make Garrett's life harder. That is not a coincidence, because the Hammerites also police the streets. Their technology directly aids their crime-fighting efforts, which in turn supplies them with a near-infinite cheap labor force for their factories. It's no coincidence that one of their factories is directly below a prison. They ensure a steady source of guaranteed income, not to mention political power over the city, by having the pickpockets and the thieves and let's be honest here, probably the politically problematic people slave away in their factories. This gives them enough time to study scriptures, hone their magic, and ponder the big questions. Naturally, a world where the two main religious orders are in such deep ideological conflict that they require a third secret organization to keep the balance can't be a pleasant one for the average person. On top of the supernatural and possibly cosmic horrors haunting this world, the citizens also have to deal with the system. The city is a place of rampant crime, systemic corruption, and widespread poverty. This is the place where the lesser nobleman Lord Bafford has so much fuck you money from his gambling dens that he built a whole ass annex to his opulent mansion for the sole purpose of displaying his scepter. And he's not even the top dog, more like a mid-dog in his best days. Lord Bafford kicks up to one Ramirez, a crime boss who has half the city's police force and political elite in his pocket. Dude is so crime boss coded that he keeps Burecks as pets in his basement. Okay, we need a side note here. Burecks are these goofy dinosaur-like creatures that exhale poisonous gas clouds. Despite their fearsome appearance, they're actually pretty easy to deal with. They're also burrowing creatures, a behavior noted in a letter by the contracting business that reinforced Ramirez's counting room. A note which was, of course, promptly ignored by Ramirez. If there's one constant in this chaotic universe, it's crime lords owning exotic animals. Anyways, Bafford and Ramirez are but a tiny slice of the city's colorful cast of crooks and opportunistic social climbers. The few books, journals, and notes found in the game offer a pretty juicy glimpse into the gigantic web of corrupt politicians, greedy industrialists, cops on the take, and criminals exploiting the leadership vacuum caused by the Baron's absence, who left the city sometime before the events of the game to fight a war that he seems to be losing. The city is up for grabs, and everybody wants a slice of the pie. And even the seemingly righteous Hammerites have a lot to gain from the city's volatile political landscape, because they can sell the order as a stabilizing force that keeps essential utilities functional and the streets safe amidst the chaos. And at the periphery of these power struggles is Garrett, a street urchin turned the most promising prospect of a secretive organization of gibberish-speaking Nazgul-looking motherfuckers turned master thief who just wants to pay his rent and piss away the rest of the score on booze and dice at the tavern. And again, most of this information is delivered not through characters doubling as glorified lore dispensers, but the rare reading material, the environment, and Garrett's occasional quips. I could go on and on about this stuff, like how even the types of in-game foods say something about this world's class system. Look, I know an apple or a piece of salami is geometrically easier to model at scale than, say, a full course meal. It would have been ridiculous seeing Garrett wolfing down a plate of, I don't know, Tuscan chicken or whatever. Just imagine Garrett balancing a bowl of chicken risotto on his knees while lockpicking a door. But it couldn't have gone for this buffet type arrangement just for practical reasons, right? Am I losing it? Is this what 5 years of YouTube does to a motherfucker? Oh man, let's talk about the presentation.
What was that?
Thief the Dark Project is nearly 3 decades old at the time of writing. I know it's hard to believe that a late 90s game is approaching the minimum age of candidacy in most Western countries, but then again, the original Dead Space is closing in on its 20th anniversary, and if San Andreas were a person, it could legally drink in the States. I swear there was a point to these facts beyond making my viewers feel old, but I lost the plot the moment I looked up the minimum ages at which a person can stand for election across the globe. There's some wild shit here, man. Like, did you know that in Finland you can run for president at the age of 18? God damn it, I got sidetracked again. Oh yeah, visuals. For an early 3D game, Thief the Dark Project holds up surprisingly well in the visual department. There are some Dark Engine specific rough edges, of course, namely the character models, and some underground areas can feel samey, but other than that, it's clear that Looking Glass Studios invested a lot of effort into making the mission areas as visually distinct as possible. Thief will take you through lush mansions, dank sewers, caverns, haunted tombs, shady city streets, abandoned city districts, creepy graveyards, 3 variations of cathedrals. There's a lot to chew on here. The art direction is something else, man, especially in faction strongholds where the design and architecture reinforce the group's beliefs. But what's particularly visually unique about Thief is the lighting. Since Thief is nothing but film noir coded, the already oppressive looking environments are complemented by dramatic shadows cast by a multitude of light sources, be it torches, electrical lights, fireplaces, and so on. Similar to Splinter Cell and the other 2 games that use Thief as a reference, sticking to the shadows is essential to survival. Equally essential to get at safety is creating pockets of pitch darkness, which can be accomplished by dousing torches with water arrows. Of course, you don't want to plunge every room into darkness because some pieces of loot and mission critical items are difficult to spot even in normal conditions. So you have to be strategic about it. Plus, I can't emphasize enough how visually striking some of these areas are. Look at this place. Look at the light cast by that fireplace. It would be an absolute travesty to douse it. This room must be protected and preserved at all costs. But beyond visuals, Thief is remembered for its use of sound to create atmosphere and reinforce the game's stealth theme. I don't even know where to start here, man. This topic could be a video of its own. Here's a thought experiment. Have you noticed how microwave beeps sound louder when you're heating up a sneaky 3 AM frozen lasagna? This is the psychological level that Thief operates at. It makes you feel self-conscious about every sound you produce, at a level that hasn't been matched by any game to this day. But unlike that lasagna, causing a racket in Thief can have dire consequences. In fact, the main reason why Thief is such a tense and immersive stealth experience is its sound propagation system. This means that along with your visibility level, you also need to take into account the sound you make while walking on various surfaces or interacting with the environment. For example, a carpet or a patch of grass is almost silent, while metal and ceramic tiles generate so much sound when Garrett's jogging, he may as well announce his presence by stripping naked and charging a group of guards. Side note, picking up non-essential objects on accident might seem like a recipe for disaster until you discover that there is a button to gently drop them on the ground. What's even more impressive is that you can approximate a guard's location by listening to their footsteps and chatter. The sound propagation system is so good that you can guess the number of guards patrolling an area with near 100% accuracy just by listening to their footsteps. This led to some of the coolest moments in my latest playthrough, where I would just sit in a corner, listen listen to my surroundings and strategize. Then there is the soundtrack. Longtime viewers of the channel know that hip-hop is my favorite genre. I love hip-hop, especially hip-hop production, so much that I jump on every opportunity to name drop my favorite albums and videos. I did exactly that in my Chaos Fury video. So, because I love this genre so much, I get very excited whenever I see it in unexpected places. Thief the Dark Project is one of them. There's some instrumental hip-hop arrangements here that could fit right into DJ Shadow's 1996 debut album Introducing. See, I told you I like to name drop albums. Now, Thief's score is not entirely hip-hop centric. You get a bit of industrial here, some late 90s alt rock there, some trip hop, some drone, it really depends on the mission. Interestingly, some missions have almost no music whatsoever, or maybe a better way to put it is that there is some music, but it's intertwined so subtly with the ambient that it feels like it's a part of the world and not a composition written specifically for that level, if that makes any sense. Thief has such a dense and suffocating soundscape. I can't express how much it makes you not want to get caught. Let's have a listen.
Someone there?
As a side note, if you're a fan of Thief's soundtrack, I can't recommend Cycle Lapin's Thief City enough. Thief City is a tribute to the original Thief trilogy. They sampled voices, creatures, and various sound bites from the games and arranged them into, well, new musical arrangements. This album captures the spirit of the game so well you almost forget it's not part of the official soundtrack. Also, thanks to Cycle Lapin, I discovered two other Thief-inspired projects that I never would have heard of had it not been for their recommendation. A prog metal project called Compendium Premonitions of Chaos by one chronicler, and City and Darkness, a dark ambient album by Scipio. They're both available on YouTube, so go check them out if you're fiending for some Thief-inspired music. Also, you will find all of these albums in this video's description. There's one last thing I want to touch on before we end this section. The mission briefs. Looking Glass could have simply stuck with the objective screens, but they actually went the extra step and made cutscenes for each individual mission. Mandalore called them surreal and smoky in his video, and I couldn't agree more. They add so much character to the missions and also offer a glimpse into Garrett's thought process. And just to get the obvious out of the way, Stephen Russell absolutely kills it as Garrett. He has the perfect voice for this role. Cool, confident, laid-back, witty, with a dash of sarcasm and cynicism. Garrett is equal parts master thief and artist, and he knows it. Let's listen to some snippets.
I have a simple job planned for this evening. Break into a guarded mansion, steal another fat nobleman's priceless trinket, and leave quietly. Lord Bafford is out of town, and rumor has it that the captain of his house guard went with him as a bodyguard. The time is ripe for a bit of burglary.
I had some money to spare after disposing of the horn, so it seemed time to invest in some new tools. Farkas is one of the few merchants willing to risk selling to an independent like me, and his prices are steep. But the other choice is to let one of the so-called city wardens give me orders, and take a cut of my profits. They've been after me for years to join one of their stables, but I'm not interested. Maybe they'll get the idea and give up. More likely they'll just ramp up the threats. Nothing I can't handle if I'm careful. And lucky. And my luck seems to have finally turned for the better.
I was contacted by a woman named Victoria. She claims to represent a client who was impressed by the way I took care of Ramirez, and now wants me to steal something for him.
The target is a magical sword, owned by a nobleman and collector named Constantine. Little is known about Constantine except that he is an eccentric new face in the city, and mostly keeps to himself.
That being said, let's get into the gameplay and start with the thing that has the biggest impact on the, well, gameplay. The difficulty settings. For one, enemies don't become stronger or more accurate. Instead, higher difficulties add more objectives and different victory conditions and slightly tweak the level to reflect the change in scope. For example, higher difficulties might prohibit you from killing NPCs, increase the number of enemies, open or close up sections of the map, and set a mandatory loot goal. In terms of objectives, Garrett might be required to steal an additional trinket on hard and expert besides the main one, but it really depends on the mission. I played the first 7 missions on hard before switching to expert, and the difference in tension and the way I approached my objectives was significant. It's like a switch flipped in my brain and I became fully immersed in the simulation, if you will. Just make sure to keep a walkthrough handy. Some trinkets are extremely well hidden, and the last thing you need after a 2-hour long mission is discovering you're 1 gold nugget short of meeting your loot goal. I'm looking at you, the Lost City. Speaking of loot, it wouldn't be an authentic thieving simulation without a fence mechanic. Consequently, before each mission, there's items and equipment to buy, with new ones added as the story progresses. What's cool is that loot and items don't carry over between missions, so you're encouraged to spend as much cash money as possible and use items freely. Garrett has all kinds of tools at his disposal. For one, there's Garrett's iconic blackjack. 1 bonk in the head from behind is enough to knock out most guards. Make sure to catch guards unaware though, unless you want to give them the Nicky Santoro special. In terms of lethal options, you have basic broadhead arrows, which can also be used to distract guards and trigger buttons, fire arrows, and a basic sword, later replaced with a unique sword capable of slaying the many horrors you'll encounter in the spooky levels. I won't spend too much time on sword fighting because ideally you'll want to avoid getting into fights. It's a basic parry and block system ideal for dealing with 1, maybe 2 early game enemies at a time. But again, you should avoid combat because there are simply too many NPCs with interlocking patrol routes to make fighting worth the effort, and the racket might attract the attention of nearby guards. Plus, later in the story, the game introduces stronger enemy types, including haunted hemorrhoids who are surprisingly spry for some reanimated skeletons. So, you know, just stick to bonking guards in the head and backstabbing anything without a pulse. Well, except zombies, you'll need holy water arrows for them. If fighting should be used only as a last resort, what's left to do? Well, a lot of things actually. For a 3-decade-old game that literally invented the first-person stealth genre, the simulation runs shockingly deep. There's the before mentioned water arrows to douse torches, moss arrows to lay down carpets and make loud surfaces quieter, gas arrows and mines to put guards to sleep, flash bombs very effective against groups of enemies, and interestingly haunts and apparitions. Noise arrows, they're not really worth the asking price. They don't so much distract enemies as they put them in full alert. Just shoot a broadhead arrow or throw a vase or something and you should be good. Rope arrows, while not as essential as water arrows, are a great tool for discovering loot and secrets. Additionally, rope arrows allow you to unlock new ways to infiltrate buildings and even bypass certain areas. So those are the tools. Now, as expected from a game of this era, there is little to no hand-holding. The game gives you a set of objectives, some tools, a map containing a rough approximation of the mission area, and it's up to you how you handle the task. Will you ghost the mission or bonk every single guard in the head? Will you scour the map for every single piece of loot or pilfer just enough to meet the loot goal? Are you a go with the flow kind of fella, or the quick save and quick load type? If you're flexible, the game will never hold that fact against you. I for one save scum like a maniac and had the time of my life strategizing and thinking up all sorts of variable and their brazen stupidity ways to untangle the increasingly convoluted stealth puzzles that the game threw at me. I started challenging myself to do things in a certain way, sort of like a thief honing their craft. Finally, let's briefly go over Thief's missions. Thief's mission variety is something of a double-edged sword. For one, the fact that Looking Glass tried to mix things up by including the odd tomb raid or horror level between the mansion heists is to be appreciated. In fact, this is why many people, including some of my YouTube peers with whom I've discussed this game, prefer the original Thief over the sequel. On the other hand, going from mansion heist to prison break-in to tomb raid to 3 variations of mansion heist and then back to tomb raid can feel a bit whiplashy to new players and disappointing to those who are more interested in the stealth simulation and just want to do cool Master Thief shit. My stance on this issue has varied widely even over the course of writing this script. Some days I can totally fuck with Return to the Cathedral, and others I'm like, well, Thief 2 has a fucking bank heist and a police station break-in. Why am I dodging traps in a tomb again? But I'm one of those people who think Thieves Guild is not that bad, so what the hell do I know, right? So it's kinda complicated. It's like, deep in my heart I prefer Thief 2's focus on the stealth simulation, but at the same time, I can also acknowledge that it lost a bit, just a tiny bit of the original's character by ditching the horror elements and the tomb raids. Okay, enough of that, let's talk about some missions. I'll just focus on the first few missions, I think that's a reasonable size sample, okay? Okay. After completing the training, your first mission is to break into Lord Bafford's manor to steal a scepter. This mission is something of a microcosm of everything you'll do in Thief. The game spawns you next to the front gate, which is heavily guarded. The game trusts that you'll look for an alternate way in, and sure enough, a couple of streets away, you find a drunk guard with a key to the sewer system. Pickpocket the key, waddle through Burek shit, and soon enough, you find yourself in the mansion's basement. Now, it's all a matter of how thoroughly you want to calm the mansion. There are bits of lore and backstory, lots of trinkets, some Garrett quips, and a banger theme. It's your standard tutorial mission and it makes for an excellent introduction to the game. The next mission is where things get serious. Garrett has to break into a prison and help his fans escape. The prison itself is located above a hammerite factory, which in turn sits on top of a long abandoned mine filled with zombies. The mission introduces alarms, security cameras, stronger enemies, and the supernatural. What's worse, the level is maze-like and the map is not as accurate as the one you had in the previous mission. Again, this is only the second mission. The prison is a turning point, a trial by fire. This is where the game either clicks with you or it doesn't. I, for one, love how this mission subverts expectations. Under normal circumstances, you should feel safer after escaping a zombie-infested mine. But here, it's the opposite. Things start to get tense when you reach the outskirts of the factory and stumble across the first hammerite patrols. Why? Well, it all comes down to the consequences of getting caught. Take the zombies. They're zombies. They're slow, they're stupid. Worst case scenario, they bite you and you spend the rest of eternity as a walking lame-brained chunk of meat jerky, until someone turns you into slushy with a holy arrow. The Hammerites? You'll spend the rest of your days in a prison factory. I'd take being a zombie over working any day of the week. The third mission is where the game starts stretching the definition of thieving, and where most new players, understandably so, jump ship. It's a tomb raid, a trap-ridden, zombie-infested, multi-layered, confusingly laid out tomb. No human enemies, just zombies and Bureks. And lots of platforming. Naturally, opinions about the third mission are split. As for me, just listen to this ambiance. That's the Horn of Quintus, a precious artifact previously owned by the wealthy noble family of the same name. It has a storied reputation amongst thieves because none have managed to actually reach it, let alone steal it. Garrett's reason for attempting to steal it? He's behind with his rent. What kind of man do you have to be to go on a fucking tomb raid to pay your rent? Is Garrett stupid, or is the housing market in the city so catastrophically fucked? That's all I have, man. I love this mission, it's one of my favorites. The next one, believe it or not, is even better. Garrett's fence catches an arrow meant for him, and he decides to tail his assassins through the city streets. Garrett finds out that the hit was ordered by Ramirez, who was, let's say, disappointed in Garrett's repeated refusals to join his outfit. Your objective? Break into Ramirez's luxurious mansion and steal a pouch from his belt. Sound familiar? I'm sure I've seen this somewhere. Must be a coincidence. Anyways, this mansion is even more elaborate than the first one. It's super fun to explore and unravel, and the best part is that you get to learn a lot more about the world in general and the city's criminal underground in particular. Next up, Thieves Guild, the first of the 3 new missions added in the gold version. The thieves stealing from thieves concept is fucking sick. It has a restaurant with an illegal casino in the basement and 2 whole mansions where the guild's leaders reside. However, between the 2 mansions missions, there's a gigantic sewer area that's very poorly mapped and a nightmare to navigate. It basically feels like 2 or rather 2.5 missions stitched together. It doesn't have that design and narrative cohesiveness as the base game missions. However, I don't think it's that bad. It took me about 4 hours to complete, sure, but it was a Friday night, I had some cold ones in the fridge, so it's not like I had anything else better to do. Had I played this mission on a, say, Tuesday night, this section would have looked a lot different. Plus, the good bits, the mansions and the casino area are on par with the base game. I also love that the enemies react to Garrett's presence. They can't believe that Garrett would be so bold or stupid to break into the HQ of the Thieves Guild. So, there you go. That's my lukewarm take on what is considered to be Thief Gold's worst mission. So let's move on to the best mission in Thief Gold. The sword. Garrett is contracted by a mysterious woman named Victoria to break into Constantine's newly constructed mansion and steal a magical sword. Constantine is rumored to be something of an eccentric and recluse, so the map that Garrett managed to obtain is obviously incomplete. From the outside, it looks like any other mansion. It's big, imposing, slightly tacky, and wait a second, why is that window crooked? Anyways, it seems like the first floor is rectangular shaped, so it is very easy to navigate. Huh. Convenient. Almost too convenient. Well, the sword's on the 3rd floor, so we may as well bag whatever trinkets we can and... What the fuck? So here's the thing, this mission has been discussed to death and for good reason. While I was too young, or more accurately too Eastern European, to play this game at release, I can't imagine the collective surprise this mission must have caused. Here you have a niche stealth game about mansion heists and tomb raids and zombies and shit, and then it transitions to Lynchian horror and plant abominations beyond human comprehension. This must have taken some guts. It's the last thing you would expect from a stealth game. This is quintessential Thief. This is why Thief is so fondly remembered and respected even today. And while subsequent missions are not all home runs, the way the game pushes combat in the final act has been well documented, each one has at least one element that makes it unique. The rug pull from the Haunted Cathedral, the ambience and world building from the Mage Towers, the Opera House and Song of the Caverns, the hide in plain sight excitement of Undercover, the disgusting dread and horror and Return to the Cathedral. I'll stop here, I think you get the idea. And that's pretty much it for this video. Thief is a damn classic. It not only pioneered the first-person stealth genre, it did it so well that few games have managed to recreate the magic of Thief's immersive simulation. Today, things are not looking super well for stealth games, at least in the AAA scene, but there are some indie titles out there trying to pick up the mantle, but all in due time. Until then, there's Thief 2 and Deadly Shadows to cover. Thanks for watching. As always, a huge thank you to my wonderful patrons whose generosity makes these videos possible. I'll see you next time.